Okay, everyone. So, I am going to try to start this video on my end. Wilrieke Sophia is in Amsterdam and wasn't working on her phone. So now let's try my phone. And let's see if I can invite her. There it is. So you're watching. So I'm going to add. It's adding. It says it's adding. It's adding. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
It works! We did it!
Whoa.
Okay.
Yay.
Good Lord. That took 3 tries.
Oh,
Thanks
that is
everyone for your
amazing.
patience. Um, so
Yes.
so pretend this was gonna be your video in Amsterdam and it's later there tonight. In the middle of the day here
Yeah.
in Portland, Oregon, on the West Coast in the United States. So pretend now this is your video. We're just doing it on my channel, and run the video. Go.
Yes. I'm so glad to be talking with you here, Reid. I'm so excited. Because there's so much, like, I love your work and I love getting to know you through our mutual friend Monique Darling and all these awesome people.
Monique. Yes.
Yeah, say Monique. And I think we all share this passion that we have to bring more relaxation, maybe it is, around sexuality and intimacy and touching and cuddling and all of that. And I'm super stoked to be talking with you today about sexual nourishment.
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Why do we need it? Why does it make us happy? And why is there such a big fuzz around sex and how often and all those things? Like, what is sexual nourishment and why would it make us happy? And what
Yeah.
can it look like?
Yeah. Well, so first, thank you so much. I know that we both love and adore Monique, and that you've done a lot of different things with Monique, and I'm just flattered that you got excited to bring me to Amsterdam in December, but then Monique, you and I are going to be doing a whole thing in
Mm-hmm.
2020. So I just want to say thank you. Like, I don't take that or I try not to take that for granted when people
Mm-hmm.
that I haven't worked with yet, like, kind of trust you on your reputation or the say so of somebody else.
Yeah.
And in the small interactions that I've had with you so far, uh, I I trust Monique, and she loves you and adores you and loves your work. And so, like, I get excited as an American to go to Europe and talk to people about consent and pleasure and why people are starving when it comes to sex and intimacy, and also like non-sexual intimacy as well, like cuddling and the things that you already mentioned. So yeah, I mean, I can give you an American's perspective on why things are going the way that they are here, but I'm also like super curious for the things that you're seeing and in your conversations and in your work and workshops and events, like what are people
Mm-hmm.
in Europe struggling with? Because I think there might be something global that's happening as well for all
Mm-hmm.
people, just around how we're so malnourished when it just comes to connection.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very strong point that you mentioned right there. I think so many people are malnourished when it comes to touch and belonging and being held. And that just might be a global thing that's going on. And that definitely needs attention, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. I've seen it here in many countries in Europe. I see it basically everywhere, is that people are very much touch deprived and undernourished, and also don't know communication around intimacy very well. They don't know how to ask for things. They don't know how to say yes or no to things. And it feels a bit like so many people are just trying. Like, I think it comes from a good place and from a very honest desire of being touched and held and receive intimacy in all the various ways that is possible, but people just don't know how to get it or where to get it. And then lots of boundaries are broken, or people get hurt in the process, or that's I think that's a bit of a general thing that I'm seeing pretty much everywhere.
Mm-hmm. The things that I think I'm seeing, right? These are just my perspectives. Also, as
Mm-hmm.
somebody who works and hangs out with a lot of other sex educators and therapists and whatnot, the thing that that I always like to ask when I'm talking to other educators is like, what are you noticing? Because for me,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm noticing is what I'm noticing in regards to people who come to workshops. So I'm running
Yeah.
events, I'm doing some things online, and the, people who are coming to a workshop or are taking an online course, that's not necessarily the rest of the planet. Like that's a
Uh-uh.
very, like for people who are even
Yeah.
watching this video, like you are extraordinary. We posted a video about talking about sexual nourishment, and somehow you all showed up and you're watching right now. Whereas a lot of people would be so maybe like put off by that or afraid that they would never give themselves permission to watch it. And so there's
Yeah.
that piece of, I think, how we inherit the bad habits of our culture, of our
Mm-hmm.
parents, of our communities. And I grew up in a household where my mom and dad loved each other tremendously. My brothers and I have three brothers. We would catch them like making out in the kitchen. They were always cuddling.
Mm-hmm.
They would,
Mm-hmm.
be sitting. The biggest television in our family was in my mom and dad's bedroom, so we would all be on the bed together, like in a big puppy pile, all of us. And my mom and dad would
Oh.
always be snuggling together. Like we grew up with that. But what I didn't realize when I was young was that my mom and dad inherited all the poor communication skills of my grandparents and
Mm.
and the culture at the time. Uh, so my mom and dad's inability to communicate their wants, their needs, their desires, their lack of tools and skill sets to be able to work through difficult conversations and upsets and disappointments, that eventually would drive a wedge into their marriage. And even though they loved each other so much, they like emotionally destroyed each other with all these little paper cuts, these little
Yeah.
emotional scars that just built up over the
Mm.
years. And so, when my brothers and I were older, when I was in high school, like my mom and dad were further apart from each other on the bed. We would still
Mm.
have the puppy pile in a way. We would have our girlfriends that we were dating at the time. We'd all pile up on the bed, but my mom and dad were no longer snuggling. They were on opposite sides of the bed. They were always yelling at each other, and my mama would eventually become an alcoholic just to try to self-medicate. And my dad, like knowing she was angry, he was that generation where he tried to fix things with money. So he became a workaholic, and their
Mm.
inability to communicate and the emotional stress that they put themselves through really trickled down on my brothers and I. And
Yeah.
and so that was the lesson for me, that like loving each other isn't enough. Like we need the skill sets and the tools, and we need to practice those skill sets. And it's because of them and their love for each other that I realized that love's not enough. And that kind of
Yeah.
set me on my journey of trying to figure out, like, how do we talk about this? Like, what are the skills,
Mm.
not just intellectually but somatically?
Mm-hmm.
And my passion is, one, like, I don't want to turn into my parents.
Yeah.
And I'm now have the privilege of helping people, like,
Mm-hmm.
not go through what I saw my mom and dad go through. And that even extends
Mm-hmm.
to me personally. For people who don't know about my career, I stepped down from teaching last year for an entire year to address community concern, and really brave people who came forward during Me Too about shit that I didn't know about, that they wanted to tell me that they hadn't been telling me. And
Yeah.
so, like, for me to learn how to have the difficult conversations with my community, because I wanted them to tell me what was true for them. And I
Mm.
was lucky enough to have people around me who are into restorative justice and transformative or transformational justice. And we put together an accountability process, and that's all public. And so there's
Mm.
even this piece about, like, for those of us who don't want to hurt each other, like, I don't even think we have great ways to talk about how do you show up for each other when you're being called out. How do you stay grounded and connected when people are brave enough and courageous enough to share things that are not comfortable to
Mm-hmm.
hear? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and those are kind of echoes of my mom and dad's inability to stay connected and have those difficult conversations, and then try to make amends to each other. Um,
Yeah.
and so like there's so much going on in today's world, and I get very passionate about it. And I have the the privilege to work with people and also surround myself with people who are way smarter than me, um, especially
Yeah.
around restorative and transformational justice, which are things that have been around for ages, and
Mm-hmm.
practiced by indigenous cultures and LGBTQA cultures, and like to have the privilege to access those tools, and have people support you in learning and practicing those tools. Like for me, like this is what it's all about. And then
Yeah.
when you have those tools, you can practice creating connection, and making amends for mistakes in ways where you get to deepen yourself as a human being, and nourish yourself. Because
Mm.
we're talking about sexual nourishment, but this is just like community nourishment too. Just like how do we connect as
Mm.
people? And I don't even
It's
know,
all
like,
in.
and I don't have kids, and you have kids, and like I can't even imagine like what it would have been like to grow up in a household where your parents were passing these tools on to you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. It's a change in the culture. You know, you share about your parents and how you grew up. And I love, by the way, how now we are creating a culture where there is this restorative justice so that we can learn from mistakes and that we not say like, hey, you did something bad, now you have to go and we don't want to see you anymore. It's like then we don't learn. And I love so much that there's this self evolving practice going on where we can actually learn and get better at things. Like I have a lot of admiration for processes like that and the courage of everyone involved. Um, yeah, you say about your parents, like I think I grew up in pretty much the opposite, and I see that with friends around me, with their parents, but also friends around me of my age, where we come from a culture here in Western Europe where we are told to hide our feelings. Like you're here to take care of others, but you're definitely not here to take care of yourself. And if you don't, we have a saying like we don't put the dirty laundry outside. That's a Dutch saying where you're not going to share with others what it is that you need. You're not
Mm,
going to share with others about your sadness or your being lonely or your need for touch. You just, you suppress it, you hide it, and you just pretend like everything's fine and you just work a little harder. Basically, that is very much a culture that I have experienced when I was younger is you have to work hard. Suffering is okay, and you're definitely not going to ask other people for support in emotional things. You can ask for practical support. That's okay, at least when you give it back as well at some point. But asking for emotional support was definitely not a thing. And I grew up with not seeing anyone hug each other. I didn't see anyone supporting each other, maybe on a funeral, but even then it was very minimal.
mm,
And I think what happened for me is that at some point I made a decision in myself where I was like, you know what, this is just not how I want to live. And maybe the generations before me live like this, and maybe lots of people still live like this, but to me, this is not the way. So I gotta learn to ask for what I need. I gotta find the people who are willing to listen and willing to meet me there and take a risk. It was very scary at first to ask for hugs and to start telling people what it was that I needed. But gradually it got easier and there was a community forming around it. I guess there were more people like that and many of us found each other and then we just, that things got easier when I was studying with a bunch of hippies. I studied trees and animals. And then I found more hippie people who were a bit like me.
mm-hmm.
And then it became better.
What,
Yeah.
like for you, did the the nourishing part, right? Like there's because when Marsha Machinsky and I started Cuddle Party in 2004 in the United States, um, like we were talking a lot about people being touch starved, and
Yeah.
touch starvation is an actual medical term, and just the psychological and health factors around being starved for touch. When you talk about sexual nourishment, like what are some of the negative effects of being starved from
Mm.
sexual nourishment, and then what do you notice as some of the benefits of
Mm.
becoming more nourished? And I'm
Yeah.
noticing that my pneumatic chair keeps slowly sinking, and so like I'm getting shorter and shorter, so my apologies while I fix it. um You're like, why is Reid shrinking? It's my cheap office chair. So what are some of the things around sexual
Yeah,
starvation and
what I'm
nourishment that you
noticing.
notice? Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm noticing in myself is when I'm starving, I get generally I get grumpy. I get more and more grumpy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like there's a sort of an inward spiral happening. Is where usually I can be focused on the world around me, and when I really get starved, I get more cranky. I go a bit inward. This the feeling is of going inward, and I'm gonna focus on addictive behavior more. So I might start, scrolling on Facebook or get lost in work. But really, it's a self-love going down circle that goes down and down and down and down.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I'm noticing where I am nourished, and I would love to talk later about what that nourishment could look like, because I think it's a broader perspective than some people might think. But when I do feel nourished, it's like there's an inner smile, there is a relaxation, like even a physical relaxation happening in my body. It's like these butterfly kind of feelings in my belly, but then I'm not projecting it at a person, but more towards the world in general. So there's more what the French call joie de vivre, more like
Mm-hmm.
life lust, more like more creative energy, more capacity to also more capacity for emotions and more resilience for emotions. So
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to be with whatever is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Those would be like two of the big things.
The thing that what you're sharing is having me think of for myself is um,
Mm-hmm.
the I think for so many people, and this also like happened in my family growing up, like there was so much tension and
Mm.
anger that when I started getting better at relationships and communication skill sets and things, like for me, like dating your species, um, like
Yeah.
like the assessment of figuring out if you are a good fit for each other and how do you figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
Like once I started having healthier relationships, things felt off because they were like too easy. Everything was like too happy.
Mm.
And then what it did was it had me freak out because as somebody who grew up in an alcoholic family, like being hyper aware and tracking
Mm-hmm.
everything to try to
Mm-hmm.
keep mommy and daddy from fighting, um,
Mm-hmm.
like when there was no fight and things were too easy, it felt like something was horribly wrong because it could only mean I'm missing
Mm.
something. It's
Yeah.
not that everyone's happy, it's that everyone's hiding everything from me. And
Mm.
I'm too stupid to see it or
Mm.
sense it. And so there's this interesting thing about being more nourished, like when you're getting enough touch, when you're getting enough intimate connection and like creative connection in your sensuality and your erotic life, and for people who are single, like this is also like your relationship with yourself and your
Mm-hmm.
erotic self. Um,
Yeah.
like all of a sudden, when I started being better nourished, I had to go through this phase of like learning how to relax because everything was so relaxing. And it was like that things were going well had me get tense because I was
Yeah.
afraid like the other shoe was gonna drop. Um,
Yeah.
and so and I guess I'm also sharing this with people like as you work on this stuff, sometimes there's this second wave of tension because things are going so well, you're freaking yourself out. Um,
Yeah.
and and it's kind of like like you're if you injure yourself and you do rehab um, and you're getting stronger again, like you have to like the feeling of healing, it feels wrong if you've
Mm.
been um, injured for so long. And
Yeah.
it's a thing that I don't hear a lot of people talk about. And it's one of those places where we start to self sabotage again because
Oh yeah.
we look for the stress, we look
Yep.
for the upset, we look for the tension, and sometimes what you need is to just remind yourself that you earned this, like you deserve this, like
Mhm.
you're allowed to have pleasure and ease and flow in your life, and
Yeah.
it doesn't make you a bad person. That you can start to achieve that. And again, like I've got like six fingers pointing back at me all the time because I have to remember these things too.
Yeah, absolutely. I can so relate to all this. It's like these very old limiting beliefs that I might still have running of I'm not worthy, I'm unlovable, and then suddenly I have a handful of lovers all wanting to come over and meet me, and I'm like, but who am I? Why would they like me? And can I really allow this, or even be in an interaction with someone and receiving touch? And then like kind of reach the end of the capacity of my receiving and be like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now it must be enough. Now that's probably gonna be too much for them, and to yeah, then it's really the limiting beliefs that are kind of like sabotaging, as you say. Yeah, totally.
There's I'm reminded of there's a educator here in the U.S., Sherry Winston, who wrote a great book on the erotic anatomy of, or the female anatomy of arousal, I believe is the right
Mm-hmm.
title for the book. And she talks about like I think I heard this from her first. My apologies if I'm getting it wrong, whoever's watching. Um, but like she talks about being a sponge, and
Mm-hmm.
like you want to soak up all that pleasure, and until you can't hold it anymore, and that you're just overflowing, like you're just wet and puddly
Mm-hmm.
because you are full. And it's the idea of practicing receiving until you can't hold it anymore. And for me, as somebody who has, even though I'm clearly labeled as a sex geek, I'm like, I have a lot of sexual shame that just comes
Yeah.
back in waves. And as I grow and as I become stronger in my capacity to receive pleasure and to create things, um, there's
Mm-hmm.
always another level of shame because
Mm-hmm.
my shame is trying to beat me back down to the size I used to be because it's not
Oh yeah.
comfortable growing,
Oh
and
yeah.
and it's not comfortable receiving, and something that I can do to practice in receiving is it allows those who love me to also practice giving. And I grew
Mm-hmm.
up in New England in America, and like you don't receive, like you give but you never receive. It's very
Mm-hmm.
very like Puritan New England work ethic, and it's
Mm-hmm.
bullshit. Like it keeps us from a free exchange, a back and forth, um, in creating that music, and a life where you really do get to nourish each other. Because it's
Yeah.
if you can't receive and you're always only giving, you're also robbing people of the opportunity where they get to have the joy of giving to you.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So so I'm coming in December. I'm super
Mm-hmm.
excited. You helped
Mm-hmm.
me pick a bunch of things to teach.
Yeah.
So like, what are you excited about? And especially for, I mean, anyone in America who wants to come to Amsterdam in December, come. You're all invited, but I'm also kind of excited to meet your community. Like, what are some of the things that you're excited about your community getting to experience?
I'm super excited that they get to experience you. I love bringing in people that I just want to share a room with to teach in that room and to have to expose as many people as I can to that. So I'm pretty much excited about everything we're going to do. I'm super excited. It's December 13, 14, and 15. And we're going to start with Date Your Species. You already mentioned that
Mm-hmm.
one. And I'm super excited about that one as well. Like, let's broaden the concept of, like, maybe we will have our ways of picking people on Tinder and stuff. But when I look at my own past, I always pick the same people, and it always is the same pattern. So I'm really curious about getting more insights about dating your species. Like maybe if maybe I'm picking the wrong species. Maybe there is other species that I actually want to hang out with. Like I'm super curious about that one. And of course, I'm also super excited. I love doing play parties and energy sex. I'm going to do that on this Saturday. And we're going to celebrate my birthday on that one. It's the week before, but we're going to
Mm-hmm.
celebrate my birthday. So I want to see if we can do some exchanges of some prize surprises back and forth. Like maybe we come up with some surprises for the crowd, and maybe the crowd wants to come up with some surprises as well. That's my
Hmm.
invitation for the people who are coming. So I'm
Well,
super excited about that.
I'll drop in my own personal birthday for me
Mm-hmm.
with my community of friends and lovers. And I you do not have to take this on. This is my own personal practice as like a shame geek, like somebody who's always
Uh-huh.
like, well, what am I ashamed of? Or more specifically, what do I think my community will stop loving me for if I ask
Ah,
for it? So that's always
yeah.
like for me when I work with people around shame, it is a little bit about one thing to look at is like, what do you think you don't deserve? What do you think
Mm-hmm.
people will stop loving you for if you ask for it? And so my invitation from now until then is for you to think about like what's something that you could ask for, which
Mm-hmm.
is tricky because you're a teacher and you're a facilitator,
Yeah.
so you have to figure out
Mm-hmm.
how to navigate the power differentials
Mm-hmm.
with your community, but
Absolutely.
with your community and with your loved ones, like, is there something that you feel they couldn't love you for if you asked for it sexually or erotically or sensually? And then
Mm-hmm.
and I've had great experiences with asking for those things, whether you get them or not,
Yeah.
just to put words into open up your for folks or my woo woo friends who are into like opening up your throat chakra, like to
Mm-hmm.
put that energy out into the universe, literally with vibration, with speech,
Yeah.
and to be witnessed, whether it happens or not, is less important than to have people see you and
Yeah.
for you to use your voice. So
Oh.
I offer that as just a little, something to percolate as we get closer to your birthday.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. And it's terrifying, so that's good.
Yeah, a little bit of terror, a little bit of terror
Oh
can
yeah.
make things great.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, before we finish, there is, of course, to be sexually nourished is easy if you have like tons of lovers around or you have a partner, But I'm curious, like maybe we can give people who are watching who are like, like me, I have no partner, I've got 3 kids, I cannot just go out and, date anyone anytime because I have to stay at home at some time, well, like pretty much half of my life. Like, can we give some ideas or inspiration to people who to sexually nourish themselves, like in a way that's accessible for everyone?
Sure. Well, the way that I like to break it down as a geek and a nerd, um,
Mm-hmm.
is is sometimes I think something that happens is we look at teachers or people that inspire us, and when they share how they got through their journey, we try to do it exactly the same way. So like there
Yeah.
are plenty of sex educators in the US and all over the world that talk about self-loving, like having a
Mm-hmm.
masturbation practice, um, and like really getting into your body, uh, and then for some people that somatic isn't the best foot in the door to start their journey.
Mm-hmm.
Like some people are more intellectual. Like I'm very
Yeah.
intellectual, and I'm somatic, and I'm also energetic. So like I like woo woo, but I also like thinking about things. But when I'm in my head, it's not like erotic. Like I'm not
Mm.
having fantasies. I'm nerding off on ideas, um,
Mm.
but not fantasy ideas. And so I think for some people, like writing, journaling about your fantasies and where you wrestle with shame, or just writing a fantasy, like writing erotica
Yeah.
that makes you hot, and all titillated. For some people, I think that would be more powerful as a practice to start
Mm.
nourishing themselves than buying a vibrator,
Mm.
and going and masturbating. So the reason I'm pointing these out is I would ask everybody to really think for a moment about, or talk to a friend or an educator, right? About how do you think you work best? Like, are you more
Mm.
somatic? Should you be like exploring your body and taking a hot shower or a luxurious
Mm.
bath? for some people they're like, oh, like that, my body's crying out for that. And for other people, they're like, fuck the bath. Like that sounds horrible. Like I don't like hot water. But for them, it would be like checking out different kinds of erotica, and reading it to figure out what turns them on, or
Mm,
even like writing in their journal about things. For other people, like some of my woo-woo friends, they're much more ecosexual. So like
yeah.
going out in nature and like touching a tree, like not just like hugging a tree, but like really like bonding with
Mm-hmm.
nature. Um, that's the thing that starts to nourish them and takes everything, like opens them up to what's next. Um,
Yeah.
for some people, just like going out and dancing, because they're somatic, but they're more rhythmically somatic. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and for people who are interested, like you can learn about these like adult learning styles and children learning styles. Um, you can start nerding out on these things, and I think there's that style for you as a human around your own sexuality, and we just don't talk
Mm-hmm.
about it like that. And so
Mm.
people feel more broken because they bought the vibrator, or they took the bath, or they read the erotica and it didn't work for them, and then they feel broken. Like it's more proof because they didn't reach your
Mm.
level of ecstaticness. They're like, you know what? This is just more proof that I'm broken. And the biggest
Mm-hmm.
message out there is that you're not broken.
Yeah.
So don't
I
stop
love
exploring.
I love what you're saying. This is actually the first time ever that someone who has no idea is explaining me exactly what I'm doing. Because I am one of those people who has taught masturbation online courses, who has participated in them a dozen times, and every time I didn't come further than day one. I would
Mm-hmm.
masturbate once and then I would just not do it. And I suck at it. Like, I think this is the first time I say it in public, but I suck at self-love and masturbation in that sense. But I love writing about it. I've written a whole book and it turns me on so much to write erotica and to read back what I wrote. And another thing that turns me on a lot is sending voice messages to people that I know appreciated me sending them a sexy voice message,
Mm.
or sending someone sexy selfies. Things like that is turning me on big time. And I've got a bathtub. I've had a bathtub for the past 10 years. I think I took a bath about 5 times, and then every time I was in it, I wanted to get out. So
Mm.
I love how you're describing how we're all different and how we can get nourished in different ways and how we can broaden our perspective on how whole we are, and maybe getting more sensitive on our inner knowing that again, that might sound woo-woo as well, but I think we know what turns us on when we just try out all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
Something more exciting than another thing, I guess. So I hope this inspires people to start trying different things.
Yeah. Where So people can find me at readaboutsex.com, REID aboutsex.com. Where can my fans and followers find you?
They can find me on exploringdeeper.com, or on Facebook as Wilrieke Sophia. We'll put my name is with this video, or on Instagram as the Intimacy Coach.
Yay. Thank you
Yay!
so much. This was such a great conversation. I think
Yeah.
I also get off on connecting with words. So
Yeah.
like I'm noticing, like I'm all amped up in an excited kind of way because like getting to talk about this stuff is what's so
Mm,
important to me because my mom and dad just couldn't talk about stuff. So thank
yeah.
you.
Yes, thank you as well. I enjoyed this very much too, and I feel super, super excited, even more than when we started talking.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.